What's up, everybody? My name is Richard, and this is Contra Talk, the podcast where we talk about things that matter. And we are talking to a friend today, Pastor Chase Davis. He is a husband and a father. He's out in Colorado. He's got his master's of theology, and he's working on a doctorate overseas as well. It's a distance thing, so he's still in Colorado, fighting the good fight and pastoring there, writing much online as well as longer form content. He's put out some books on different subjects. We're talking today, though, about the transgenderism bill, for lack of a better word. There's a few different ones packaged in there. A couple of them are, if you're not accepting of your child's ideology or identity, that could be deemed as child abuse, according to this new law. Or if you dead name so-called the person, say your child's a boy and his name's Billy, and he switches to Tammy, you call him Billy, that would be dead naming. That could be illegal, according to this law. There's a few other things as well, of course, radical pro-abortion and all the rest. We talk about that mainly, his fight, what he's doing, what other pastors are doing there in Colorado, and how this actually has a lot to do with red state America. Also, don't think we're safe in Tennessee or Florida or Kentucky, places like that. The leftists will come, and we need to be ready, and we need to fight. But this is a good conversation where we talk about those things, some aspects of that, how to do that, and I think you'll like it. Enjoy. Chase Davis, Pastor Chase Davis, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Good to be here.
Yeah. No, thanks for being able and willing, coming back on the show. You're in Colorado, and last time we talked, at least one of the times we talked about church planting and kind of just Christianity, all that in Colorado, especially Boulder, very challenging place. But specifically, you actually just wrote an article very recently for the Center for Baptist Leadership on transgenderism and just the totalitarianism that a new bill that's passing or did pass. Has it already passed, or is it just proposed?
Well, yeah, let me tell you about it because it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
What's going on is that last Friday, March 28th, the Democrats apparently have been sitting on a bill. This is one of several they're trying to push through. I'll kind of go through several of them. But this one, particularly HB 251312, is intended for quote unquote transgender protections. And so it has 9, I believe, from what I remember, kind of provisions of what they're going to bind Colorado parents, Colorado citizens under law. Those deal with dress code enforcement in schools. Those deal with misgendering someone in your workplace. So if a customer comes to your place of business and you misgender them, you could face penalties, crimes. It would be considered a crime, all this kind of stuff. And so they brought it out. I keep going in the article. We kind of list it out. It criminalizes dead naming, misgendering for any business. It criminalizes any dress codes, conforming to gender standards. If you don't go along with the delusion that your boy can become a girl, they can strip you of your parental rights if you're in a custody battle. It broadly criminalizes any coercion by parents. So like if you try to get your kid to do something he doesn't want to do, that would be criminal. And it would empower the state to basically take away parents' kids. So it's one of the most radical. I'm not a legal expert. I'm a pastor, but it appears to me to be one of the more radical bills that the left has attempted in the United States of America. There's other states that have done this, whether it's I want to say California, Minnesota, Washington, I believe. But what's happening in Colorado right now is they're basically treating it like a progressive sandbox kind of idea thing where they have total control and they're going to push as much as they can, as hard as they can, as fast as they can. And so with this bill, particularly HB 251312, they didn't announce that there was going to be any kind of hearing on it until last Friday, March 28th. And that hearing would take place 4 days later. Actually, it took place on April Fool's, which I thought was ironic because
Yes,
it's
indeed.
a joke. And so no one knew about it. They held it, and some of the things that came out in what you can do is provide testimony. You can go get your 2 minutes to talk, and you can provide testimony. Some of the stuff that came out of that was that the people who put together the bill, all Democrats, of course, The people who put together the bill, they are required to go to like stakeholders and do kind of a listening in, listening out. Like, what does the community think about this bill? They intentionally did not listen to anyone who opposes transgender ideology. So it was
Wow.
the only people they were getting feedback from were people that already agree with them. Um,
Wow.
so what we did is we rallied. There were a lot of people involved, a lot of people in politics, culture, ministry involved, and we got some people to the building. I wrote a testimony online. You can do that in Colorado. I don't know about other places. We had several pastors in the area write in, um, kind of just written testimony about why this is a wicked bill, why it should be disobeyed. I was for the first half, it was like 10 hours of
Mm.
people testifying for and against. The against, it seemed like they stacked the against first, and then late into the night, it went till like 1 a.m. The fours, all the transgenders were coming, and you can
Mm.
tell. That's what's weird. You can always tell by their voice. This is going to be for the bill. They want this bill, and the way they talk is so bad. It's and I mean not just like the sound of their voice. I'm talking about the way they reason. So like
Yeah.
they're using emotional sabotage, and they're saying, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to kill myself. It's like that kind of thinking. And it's like, wow,
Right.
that trying to reason with someone like that is insane. But I will say this, I was encouraged by how many Coloradans came out from all different backgrounds. Some were detransitioners, some were what they call TERFs, feminists, and truly feminist. Some were gay men, and a lot of Christians. As far as I know, we have about
That's a
10.
crazy coalition.
It's crazy.
That's
We have
really is.
about 10 kind of Christian evangelical organizations based in Colorado. These are organizations that are widely known, focus on the family, Navigators, Compassion International, Association for Christian Schools International, Young Life. These are all based in Colorado. To my knowledge, none of those organizations have said anything about this, and they're based here in Colorado. It's quite disturbing. Big
Seriously?
church, yeah, big churches in the area are not talking about it. None of their pastors are saying, to my knowledge, some of the largest churches in the state, I haven't seen any action on Facebook, Twitter, anything about why we should oppose this, why it should be struck down. So this is just one. And here's the thing. So it's going to pass in terms of like it's a process, right? So
Hmm.
people read this as doom and gloom, and it is very bad what they're trying to pass. It can be litigated in the courts. If it makes it up the Supreme Court, it will probably be struck down just on the basis of free speech alone. Not to mention a litany of other things. But again, not a lawyer, not a politician, just a pastor. So like when you hear what I'm about to explain and how it's probably going to pass, that's not a like throw your hands up in the air, the fight's over. It's just kind of explaining the process. So what happens next is they have something going on today. They're only allowing 2 hours of debate on this issue. I believe it's in the House, and then it goes to the Senate. There's going to be a final vote on, and they scheduled it, I think, on purpose. And if they didn't schedule on purpose, it's just because the people that are making this kind of stuff are evil,
Mm.
and that's how they think. Scheduled on Sunday morning during Lord's Day worship. That's when it's going
What?
to be voted on. And
On
so, of
Sunday?
course,
Who's
yeah. So, of course, Christians can't come. There's four things that they're trying to pass: taxpayer-funded abortions. That's SB 183. Codifying gender-affirming care and health care. That's HB 1309. The one we already mentioned, misgendering is child abuse and discrimination, and then SB 129, out of state telehealth abortion pills. These are all being passed. This is not to mention the radical gun control that they're trying to pass right now, stripping Americans of their right, their Second Amendment right. They're trying to modify all the stuff, which we know, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. These laws rarely do anything except bind the consciences and bind the freedoms of law-abiding citizens. And so that they're trying to pass that. They're going full court press out here in Colorado. I have no idea about other states. I don't know if this is happening, but what we're seeing for pastors like me who are not in a red state, you might say, is we're seeing the
Mhm.
left is incredibly rabid. We've
Mm.
had Tesla dealerships firebombed. They are investing tons of money into these protests that are supposed to appear grassroots and organic. We have Bernie Sanders and AOC coming out posting inflated numbers, by the way, about how many people attended the rally. And so the
Mhm.
left is very energized because Trump is in power, and they're going full court press against any kind of conservative Christian background. And like I mentioned up front, the coalition that stands against them isn't even generally conservative. They're just opposed to this progressive woke nonsense that they keep pushing. And so, I don't know if it's reaching a breaking point, but I think my biggest frustration is how so many organizations, there's so many good Christians in the state. And I don't see a great deal of organization and effort to stand opposed to this stuff and to motivate their people. It's as if the churches that went through 2020 to 2024 with BLM, COVID, all this kind of stuff, they just were like, just don't say anything and everything will be fine.
Mhm.
And it's like you're continuing to do that and not everything is fine. Like
Mhm.
this is not good. Not good for us as Christians and not good for our neighbors. And so they're taking the same playbook. I mentioned the article. You can link it if you want with the Center for
Yeah,
Baptist
well.
Leadership. But I mentioned how this is how, like a lot of the kind of byproducts of this evangelical, winsome third way approach to ministry, where they should keep their faith out of the public square, where pastors shouldn't be quote unquote political, all this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And so, like I said, we got some pastors up there. I wrote a written testimony against it. Libs of TikTok highlighted it. Elon has highlighted it. So we're seeing some good publicity on it. But
Mhm.
what I think I'm trying to inspire and encourage pastors to do, there's two things. One is if there's a pastor in Colorado that sees this stuff and knows what the Bible says, he should use his pulpit and use his connections to speak out against this wickedness. And
Mhm.
two, I'm trying to say, look, red state Christian, you who think you're safe where you live because, oh, we voted for Trump here, we voted Republican, whatever you think it is, it's coming your way. Like
Mhm.
they're not going to let up. Whenever they try to get power, this is what they do. And if Kamala had been elected, this is the kind of stuff they would have tried to push nationally. And so we're trying to fight it here to keep it from coming there. And that so
Wow.
we could use your prayers. All Christians here could use your prayers. All these organizations need to be inspired to action. And so yeah, I haven't felt this like motivated to resist this kind of government, not just government overreach, but wickedness since like 2020. I mean, this stuff is abominable, and they are just they're running roughshod. Now, there's hope. Polis might quibble on this. I don't know. Gavin Newsom seems to be backtracking on some of his radicalism. I don't
Mhm.
know. So it could be vetoed.
Polis is the
But
governor. Hey, it's me from the thing you're currently watching. I know, crazy, right? If you're liking this, would you mind liking and commenting, sharing? Consider subscribing too. I don't want to demand subscriptions. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm not quite there yet, but if you wouldn't mind doing that, you're enjoying this, it would help me out. I appreciate it. Back to the show.
yeah,
He is
Jared
your
Polis is
governor.
the
Okay.
governor, and he's fairly libertarian. He doesn't come off as a radical progressive. He comes off as
Mhm.
a gay libertarian, which is what he is.
It's
And
true. As a homo. So.
he's liberal, he's Democrat, but he's not as bad as some have been. And so, you know, that's what we're facing. That's what's going
Mhm.
on, and we're trying to fight it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's just, well, appreciate the fight for one. But that is, I mean, first takeaway is it's shameful that there's at least 10 major Christian ministries organizations and no one. I was, dude, honestly, you were saying that. I was like, well, yeah, of course they're all going to be there. I'm wondering who's going to speak and how many people are coming from each place. And, maybe this guy or this gal speaks and there's other people just kind of supporting them. None of them. You're telling me nobody from Focus on the Family or anything like that
Not that I
is
can
there.
see. I can't like I looked on their website. I don't
That's
know who
unbelievable.
all
That's just
testified because it was 10
unbelievable.
hours of testimony. I was listening in the car between baseball practices and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, to my
Mm.
knowledge, like, let me see, because I want to get the list. I put a list together. Um,
That's
here we
crazy,
go.
dude. Like, I just,
There was one that was represented. It was the Christian Home Educators of Colorado. They had a spokesperson speak up on behalf of Christian Home Educators of Colorado. But yeah, like I said, we've got Focus on the Family, the Navigators, Compassion International, Summit Ministries, Association of Christian Schools International, Waterstone, a big Christian financial group, Biblica, Young Life, Promise Keepers, David C. Cook, Christian Publishing House. All these organizations are here. And what I found interesting while listening to the testimony is if it was somebody who wasn't a Christian, they were fully
mhm,
willing to call this stuff wicked, bad, you know, uh, uh, what it is.
mhm,
Most of the Christians, not the pastors we had there, but many of the Christians. Let me take that back. Not most. I'll just say a noticeable amount of the
mhm,
Christians when they would testify, they were unable to call it for what it is because they didn't want to appear as unloving. They would just say, I don't hate anyone. I love everyone. This isn't about, just leave me alone kind of thing. But the secularists and the pastors, some of the pastors that were there were a few, were able to clearly identify it. But the Christian
Hmm.
church has been so ill-equipped to resist this stuff because they've been so inundated with a message from like the He Gets Us campaign, and it's basically like, leave us alone. We love everyone. Please don't hurt us. And I'm like, that will lose. If that's what's being
Yeah.
taught in our churches, if that's what's being propagated and how we're discipling people, that will lose every day. Because it's not a Christian faith that will resist this kind of stuff, whether you want to call it tyrannical or wicked, both.
Hmm.
It's not going to resist it. So I think that's what's frustrating. Look, if these organizations said something, I'd love to see it, and I'm
Hmm.
happy. I'll go public and I'll say I'm wrong. I was Focus on Family was there. They had a rep there speaking for the organization and all their constituents. I was wrong, but to my knowledge, I didn't see anything.
You mentioned He Gets Us. That's one of my favorite things to write about and talk about. But leftist, red letter Christianity, all that.
Yeah.
But you really think, not to push back or anything, do you think it's just that, or is it more? I mean, I know you mentioned third wayism. I think that's written in the article as well regarding Tim Keller and this whole thing. Is that what it is? I mean, I don't disagree. I think I totally agree, and I see it. But is that what you think, that's the preponderance rather of it, that it's just people, just leave me alone. It's not a big, they're almost more libertarian, right? Than you're saying homosexuals or other people who are against it, and they're calling it wicked, and yet Christians don't have the muster to say that it's wicked. That's what
Yeah,
you're saying, right? Like in effect, this
yeah,
gay guy over here, this feminist over here is like, hey, this is wicked, this is wrong, and the Christians, a lot of them are like, it's not God's best, to quote Joel Osteen,
yeah.
right?
It's a lot of quibbling. You have to understand the context of the Western United States is very libertarian in general. So a lot of the
Yeah.
people who moved out here because they wanted to get away from people, because they wanted to be left alone. You see that mainly in like Idaho and Montana, places like that. But Colorado has a long history of that, where
California too, yeah.
there's not a lot of deep roots for people, a lot of transplants, a lot of people moved here from other places. It was so funny. Half the people that it seemed like a lot of the people that were testifying in support of the bill were from like either California or somewhere else or the Northeast.
Mhm.
Um, and
Mm.
so, yeah, you just get this kind of tepid defense of the faith where they don't want to offend people. And you'll get a lot of Midwesterners down here who want to, come from Minnesota, Illinois, big Chicago influence on the Front Range. And so their kind of temperament is like, Midwest nice. It's kind of that
Yeah.
Minnesota nice. Like they don't want to upset anyone. And so like that's not, you've seen what has happened in Minnesota, and it's bad. So yeah, it's hard to say it's one ideology, because here's what I experienced, dude. When I went to Denver Seminary, at the time I was very infatuated with the Young Restless Reform, Matt Chandler, Tim
Mhm.
Keller, all these guys, right? And on Denver Seminary's campus, they were just not a big deal. Like like some people, like a lot of people I met, they were like, "Who's Tim Keller? What does he do?" Like it just
What?
doesn't.
Wow, that's funny.
It was fun back in 2011 when it was happening, because it made me wake up pretty quick to the fact that like, oh, like this segment that I'm a big fan of evangelicalism isn't that well known. And
Mm.
so it would be easy to pin it on like, this is the Gospel Coalition's fault, but like a
Yeah.
lot of Christians aren't reading the Gospel Coalition. They're just normal Christians that want to love God and love their family and have a good life and be left
Mm.
alone. And the time for being left alone is over. They're dominating you right now. And so I don't know what has gotten into the water. I have theological ideas, I have philosophical ideas about kind of Christian spirituality, but there's
Mhm.
just not a sense of defense and attack, of winning. It's very just like, well, this is what the world's going to do, and you're like,
Mhm.
cool, that's really bad for people. Like that's not good.
Right.
So
Would you think, and I know I believe my memory serves right, I know we last talked a while ago, but um, I know there's been a lot of shifts eschatologically for a lot of people, including myself, and having this kind of pietistic mindset. Would you say that's more? Would you say that's captured a lot of people, kind of a piety and a rugged individualism of leave me alone, holy huddle, the rapture, that kind of thing? I mean, again, I don't want to lay all this, just like you don't want to lay it all at Gospel Coalition. I don't want to say, oh, it's all the Dispy's fault. They probably bear a lot of it responsibility, but not everybody, right? Not all of it, I guess.
Yeah,
Would you say
yeah.
that it is a lot of that?
I think that I was just talking to my brother about eschatology yesterday, but um, I think that the view of the end times does shape how you live today and your temperament. It doesn't always, but that kind of vision for the future where things are going does invariably impact your life. But yeah, that pious and pietism, not pious, piety and being a pious person is really good. That's holiness. We want to
Mm-hmm.
pursue holiness and devotion in our life. Pi, kind of the pietism is this idea where we've got to like uh really just focus on our own spiritual life and not care about anything else in the world. So what
Mm-hmm.
matters is, me and being able to have a quiet time and worship.
Right.
If I want to go to church, I have the freedom to do so, if I want to. But
Mm-hmm.
mainly if I feel God. That's what's most important to me. And it's funny, I'm preaching on First Samuel. I was just working on the sermon before we got on the air. First Samuel 11. Nahash the Ammonite comes to Jabesh Gilead. And he makes the people of Jabesh Gilead are surrounded. They're about to be decimated. They're Israelites. And they go, let's make a treaty. What would it take for us to live?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, okay, I'll make you a deal. You can live if I can gouge out all of your right eyes. Now, why would he want to gouge out the right eyes? Was it just because he was wicked and wanted to harm them physically? Well, yeah, but more importantly, when back in those days you would hold a shield, and most of people are right-handed, you
Mm-hmm.
would hold a shield, and your right eye was the one that was exposed, so you could see over the shield.
Mm-hmm.
And so, by blinding their right eye, they were made impotent for warfare. They could still do manual labor and be kind of like slaves, vassal slaves of
Mm-hmm.
Nahash, but they couldn't war. They were rendered impotent. And my argument is that the world has made the same offer to Christians, evangelicals.
Mm.
If you'll just stop bringing your faith into the public square, we'll leave you alone. If you'll just stop wielding that sword of the Spirit, the Scripture, and you'll stop wielding it because you're a Bible thumper, you beat people over the head with the Bible. If you'll stop that, you can have Jesus in your heart and your home. Just
Mm.
coexist, be tolerant and inclusive. And Christians have been like, okay, we'll take that deal because that sounds easier and like, you can render us impotent and we don't really have any power to fight back. Just leave us alone. They're not going to leave you alone. Like they're not. They're
Right. No.
coming for you.
No, they're not.
And so Christians have to resist this. I think what's also disheartening is once a Christian makes that deal to have their right eye gouged out for impotence, once they've embraced impotence as a Christian, if they see other people not letting their right eye be gouged out, not embracing impotence, actually fighting back, they get very angry because
Mm-hmm.
they do feel a great deal of shame about what they've chosen to do. They've chosen to
Mm-hmm.
give up and give in and compromise and adopt kind of worldly philosophies over biblical truth. And so there's a weird interplay there between Christians and evangelicals where those of us who are willing to put our name out there publicly with our face, online, in person, wherever, in the pulpit,
Mm-hmm.
we will often get hated by other evangelicals because we're doing that because we touch on that source of shame that they have abandoned the field. And
Mm.
that's difficult to deal with, but that happens all the time.
It does. I saw two different people just today on Twitter, back and forth, little interactions. I won't name their names because it's shameful. But yeah, I mean, it's. I heard somewhere I was on another interview, and it was like kind of like crabs. Apparently, if they're all, you're crabbing as a human because you're throwing them in a bucket, you're going to go cook them, right? One crab will try and climb out, and the other crabs will pull them back in. I don't know how true that is. Never crabbed, but it would make a lot of sense, at least as far as like, hey, what's he doing? Get back in here. Like we're all in this together. And there is that sense of shame, like you're saying, which I would say to somebody who's, we're not all the mouth, we're not all the hands, we're not all the eyes, we're not all the feet, etc. We have different parts of the body. And so even if you're not somebody who's, open air preaching or a pastor who's preaching week in and week out, or an evangelist who can just go share their faith with anybody, or missionary, right? There's still people, to use the analogy of missions, to hold the rope, to be an encouragement, to give money, to pray, to do these things. hold the rope for those who are going down into the hole, as it were. Um, Especially the modern missions movement 300 years ago. That was a big kind of word picture with a lot of those guys out of England. And so, yeah, but don't shame people. Like, that's retarded. Like, but I mean, it's just, but but it's human nature, right? In the sense that makes people feel good. Like, dude, Chase, like, you're so abrasive. You're so this. I mean, that happens. I'm more active on Twitter lately than I have been in recent months and years. But yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, one guy, just as an example, he wasn't even Christian as far as I could tell, not even a leftist liberal, but it was like, you're such a terrible example of Christianity. It's like, you don't even believe in God. What do you even know? You know nothing. And I told him that. I'm like,
Exactly.
I don't know you, you don't know me, and your words mean literally nothing, dude. And all I said was,
Yeah,
I was calling out the dude in a dress, Representative whatever McBride, out of
yeah,
whatever Delaware, I think it is. And it's like, and a lot of the people are ragging on that. And I guarantee you, a lot of them aren't Christians. And it's like, we have
totally.
this like stupid be nice, 11th commandment, that whole thing. And it's just like, guys, it's going to be shameful when wokeism and leftism dies, which I think it's already on a deathbed in at least some respects. Um, when so much of the church doesn't have any credit. And not like I'm
Yeah.
looking for credit, and I highly doubt you are,
No, right.
but
I know.
as soldiers, are we not soldiers of Christ? What are we fighting? Right? We're fighting about baptism, which we could fight about. That's fun sometimes. We could argue with Roman Catholics, cool, I guess. We could squabble about eschatology or soteriology or something. But like, these people are neutering children. They're chopping off healthy body parts. They want to literally take children away, likely stick them in radical leftist homes from normal people, even if they're not Christians, because, little Timmy now wants to be little Tammy, and you're not all for that, and therefore you're abusive. We're going to take your kid away. Like,
Yeah,
that's insane. And if you
it's
don't
insane.
see that, not you, but people listening or people adjacent, I hope my listeners pay attention to stuff and already see its insanity. But we have to know somebody, even maybe somebody at our church or we work with or something, that, well, I don't know, Pastor Chase. I don't know. Like, that's just a little. It's like, what? The house is on fire. Like, it's
Right.
just, golly, man.
It's crazy. Yeah, and yeah, it's easy to become hopeless in these kind of situations, I guess. I mean, like, it's bleak, like,
Yeah.
you know, but that's not an option for Christians. What do
Yeah.
we like? We are those who believe in Jesus Christ and the resurrection of the dead. What are they going to do? Kill us and we still live? Like, so you got to have your kind of joyful warrior spirit about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's very frustrating when you see other Christians will criticize those who are speaking loudly, and that's what Spurgeon, I forget the quote, uh, but like the cowardly always do that to bold-hearted men. That's what
Yeah.
Spurgeon said, something to that effect. And so, you'll get that a lot. Is don't you see
Mhm.
you're upsetting the mission field, you're upsetting the left, you're upsetting the lost, and it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, like, and I get where they're coming from because I remember thinking that way. So it's not like
Mhm.
I'm
Me too.
unfamiliar with that kind of sentiment. But it's super disheartening because it's like we're brothers in Christ. Like, you may have a different model of ministry than me, you may have different emphases, but we can all agree this is wicked. But as soon as you upset a feminist or a leftist, they all of a sudden try to tone police you, like, oh, you really upset that person. And like you said,
Mhm.
when they come at you with like, that's not very Christ-like, it's like, you don't even believe in Christ. And so my favorite question to ask them is like, do you normally go around asking Jews and Muslims or telling them how they should practice their faith? Is that a practice of yours
Right.
to go lecture religious people on their religion? Leave me
Yeah.
alone. Like, you don't,
Yeah.
if you want to have a discussion about Christianity, happy for it, but please do not take the name of my God and pretend like you know him and know what he expects of mankind. You don't, like
Mhm.
you said, you know nothing about that. You don't even believe in
Mhm.
him. So please just quit. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of Christians see that stuff and they're like, oh, he has a good point. Yeah, Christians are supposed to be loving. And if that guy
Right.
doesn't feel loved, then I guess we're missing the mark. It's like, that is insanity. Insanity.
Yeah. Other people's feelings aren't our barometer at all.
Hmm.
Um, so obviously this is going to happen in other places, even if it's struck down, which sounds like it might pass, but there'll certainly be Supreme Court and other things, cases
Yeah.
against it in the near
And it could get
future.
struck down in the Senate. It could get vetoed. I mean, who knows what the Lord may have?
Yeah.
There could be divine intervention in some other ways that we cannot foresee, in which it
Hmm.
could be struck down. Uh, so yeah, you're right. It will get challenged. But yeah, I interrupted your flow of thought. What were you
Oh
going to
no,
say?
no, it's just that I mean it'll happen or can happen, brought to whatever. I mean, Kentucky, although we're in Ohio at the moment, but Kentucky Democrat governor, but super majority Republican, and he gets some things through, but not much, and vice versa, right? Because there's a little bit of veto power, but then they can overthrow the veto and blah blah blah. Um, but that doesn't mean these things can't. I mean, look at Texas, right? I mean, look at even places like Tennessee, Florida, maybe somewhat, but certainly Texas and Tennessee used to be bastions of red, just seas of red. You now see a lot of people moving there. We have that Islamic city somewhere in Texas, and that
Yep.
whole crazy hullabaloo, which is just insane all by itself. But I mean, I don't know what. I know we don't have a ton of time today, but what can people do? Either the average person, right? Clearly, one example is not to tear other people down, especially Christians who are in the fight, full on. But what do you suggest is regular churchgoers, for people to do, even in red states?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's like I mentioned earlier, that's a big heart of mine is to like I'm on the front line battle. I'm in it with my church. I've got my community. There's many other people. It's not just me. But we're on the front lines. And we're
Hmm.
we're calling back to you saying, "Hey, gear up because they're coming. They're coming for you.
Hmm.
They're coming for your kids." They've said this out loud. They put this in their videos. They want to destroy your way of life. And you in your theology and in your biblical understanding, you need to get back to the Bible and read the Bible as it is, not
Hmm.
laden with your sentimental pi pietism, not laden with a libertarian freedom. Just let people do whatever they want in their own bedroom. Not
Hmm.
no. What does the Bible say God demands of the world? Read God's law
Hmm.
and then evaluate how in our town are we going to prevent this from ever happening here? If you hear what I'm saying on the air and you say that sounds like a nightmare, I agree. So
Hmm.
what are you going to do about it there to make sure it never happens there? Because it's a nice fantasy world to think, oh well, if I moved in a super red county, then all will be well. And that's not the case at all. Anytime you're
Hmm.
attacking demonic ideologies publicly, you will get attacked, even from Christians, from normal conservatives.
Yeah.
They do not want to be seen as that kind of person. And so those kind of whether you use the term normie or whatever, just kind of general Christian attending a church. I don't wish this upon my children. I don't wish this upon my town or my state. Do something about it now. Pass a
Hmm.
law. Go uh gosh, I'm gonna talk with pastors in Colorado quite often. And it's like they have a huge opportunity to get active in their own state to pass laws now,
Hmm.
not waiting for this stuff to come. And so you're going to have to explore the legal possibilities within your context that would allow you to prevent this from ever coming your way. Um, and so yeah, there's all sorts of things you can do. You can involve politically, you can get involved in the school board. Public schools particularly are hotbeds for this stuff. And so you can get involved in that locally. You can get involved in a business association, anything like that to get involved politically as much as you can, not overdoing it. You still have to, do your job. Um, but that's part of your responsibility. And so, yeah, I'm going to say something provocative. It's been said
What
by others.
you?
Mm. This is it. The progressive totalitarian left has to be eternally crippled from ever gaining power anywhere ever again.
Hmm.
They cannot You cannot go like, well, you know, there's always going to be this kind of back and forth, and it's actually good to have different perspectives. No, like that's over. Like they played their cards. We see what they
Hmm.
want. They're done. They're done until they repudiate these ideas. And ultimately, I would hope that until they turn to the Lord Jesus Christ, there is no way they should ever be elected anywhere ever again or be given any power in any kind of institution, a business,
Yeah.
a school, anywhere, because this is what they do. They're for the Christians that are too sympathetic to the left, and I'm talking like the sin of empathy type stuff. You can't let them near the steering wheel because they will not avoid that obstacle.
Hmm.
And if a leftist presents themselves, and when I say leftist, I'm not talking like classical liberal or somebody who believes in the free market of ideas or all like I'm talking about, dyed in the wool,
Hmm.
that they can't touch the any kind of powerful institution in any scope to have any say on what goes on in our town, in our schools, in our businesses. That day is over. And until Christians kind of get that through their mind that you have a duty as a Christian before the Lord to go worship the Lord on Sundays. You have spiritual needs that you need met in the church, and then out in the world, so to speak, in the realm of the political, you have a duty to get involved in that way. And it's
Hmm.
totally within your rights to say this is not going to happen here. We're not going to let it happen here. And it
Right.
does. You don't have to wait until it comes to your doorstep. You can pass laws now to prevent it happening. The way I thought about it was like, let's say you live in a small red town, like challenge them to pass some kind of building code regulation or some kind of law to where rainbow flags will not be permitted, right?
Hmm.
And let it get challenged in court and maybe lose that battle, but try it. Like do
Yeah.
something to prevent this stuff from coming to a town near you, because otherwise it's just going to keep happening.
Yeah. Um, I want to read a quote from the article here in a second, but the one thing that strikes me with this, and obviously I want your comment on it, but that it's like the leftists, like the people who just they see a MAGA hat and they just vitriol, right? They just blow up. Like, I just saw it was just short, and the lady was, it's always the eyes. And she's like, I woke up and I chose violence today against the red hats. Violence every day. And it's like, I'm not scared of you at all, like physically, like you're super overweight and you don't probably even know how to punch or hold your fist, let alone do anything. Now, I'm also probably not going to punch you unless I'm really under threat, right?
Yeah.
But regardless, I'll never see that lady, I'm sure. But regardless, there are dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands of people who are mentally unstable. And that's my question. Do you think that some of this is just the fact that these people 20, 30, 40 years ago would be in some sort of psychiatric? I mean, again, if you remove a spiritual component, because there is certainly demonic possession, I'm fully on board with that. Text says there's no verse that says it can't happen today, as some cessationists might think or believe. But do you think some of this or a lot of this has to do with just that, where it's kind of like an open border? So we have all sorts of, raping, pillaging gangs. Same way, we have all this unhinged stuff. Government school teachers, just the most Looney Tunes person. And it's like, you should get help. Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that. A great example of it actually ties into what I was just talking about. So, like Red Oak, Texas, I think it's south of Dallas. It had a trainee school teacher, right? And it wasn't until she came out, I don't know what it was, came out on TikTok and talked about how proud they were that their students knew their pronouns in class. Then that individual got fired.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of conservative Christians, they're like uncomfortable with that. And I'm like, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, good.
Wait, uncomfortable
Like
with what exactly? The firing
her getting
or
fired. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
her getting fired. Or they don't want to say it's good that she was fired because they don't want to appear unloving
Yeah.
to people. And so that's a real problem. But to kind of answer your question, I think a lot of it has to do with mental illness. A lot of it has to do with social formation and what some have called social contagion. That's how a lot of this trans ideology is spread, and it's preying on kind of a very weak-willed American population that is very, you know, easily swayed by these
Mhm.
kind of things. And because they got the public schools and the children are naturally more kind of moldable, formable for ideas.
Yeah.
That's why we're in charge of catechizing our children. They they got kids that they mentally handicapped in a certain way. Now,
Mhm.
can those children leave that? Absolutely. We have thousands of stories of detransitioners. Most kids who kind of go through a season where they're questioning their gender, they grow out of it, you
Yeah.
know. So do I think that their mental illness is more prevalent today? That's a good question. I think there's a lot of studies that say it is. There could be a variety of reasons, whether it's work environment, prospects for growth, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think
Narcotics. I mean, prescription drugs are at an
yeah,
all-time
prescription
high,
drugs,
right?
all
I
that kind
mean,
of
who
stuff.
knows what
And
all these
so
people are on?
right. And so there is a thing where as our societal institutions are broken down and we've let them go, we've kind of let the loonies out of the loony bin.
Yeah.
And so there's no kind of firewall there to protect the general population. You see this all the time in the homeless community where there's people that live just their life on the street and they're
Yeah.
mentally unstable. They've got schizophrenia, other kind of stuff. And then what you see with the left is they will typically highlight these people. They'll first they relabel them as they do in the news in Colorado. They're not homeless, they're unhoused. And then what they do is they celebrate their mental illness, right? So now we're celebrating mental illness. So you have mental
Uh,
illness. Oh, this is a disability, and we should look how beautiful you are in your mental illness. And it's like that's not admirable. Like we should feel compassion, sympathy, and pity for these
yeah.
individuals and love them and attend to their needs as we can. We should share the gospel with them as we can. But this idea that we should celebrate mental illness is just ludicrous. I can't believe we have to
Yeah.
say this. Like, it's just insane.
Right. No,
So
it
yeah,
is.
and like
Completely insane.
I think what you said is right though. I think a lot of it is demonic. I think a lot of it is just straight up demonic. It goes back to Old Testament stuff, child sacrifice with abortion, genital mutilation, all these sorts of things. And so we're
Yeah.
seeing the return of paganism, and this is what comes with paganism is a lot of wickedness.
Yeah. Um, there's one other thing, and then I want to read this. But then we got to go. I just heard, was it Isker? I think it was Andrew Isker. He was talking, pretty sure it was on the Tucker Carlson interview that he did recently. And he mentioned, and it's something that I've thought about, though not exhaustively for sure. But, we see in the New Testament, the Old Testament, there's obviously all sorts of craziness. And this is just really one slice of the world, right? In one sense. Whether it's Acts and you're following this stream and that's a little more detailed and we kind of know the names and the places, or just Israel, right, throughout the Old Testament, being called with Abraham and all that. But he mentioned and said that Christ conquered, right, the demons and the principalities and powers, which I would say generally yes, amen. Not that he's a partial conquering king, but obviously there's still sin. There's still all sorts of wickedness in the world. We're not in the new heavens and the new earth yet, contrary to what some people may say. Where do you draw the line? I guess maybe just pastorally, scripturally, your own testimony, because I'm fully convinced there's demon possession going on. I don't know how much, right? I'm not I'm not hugely into that. Maybe I've experienced it once or twice firsthand with someone around me. But you see that, and you just said it's a return of paganism. Is it? I don't know. Now I'm kind of like stuck on my question. Like, yes, Jesus, the cross once for all, the just for the unjust, right? That he might bring us to God. Amen. Not to discount the cross, that's not what I'm doing. But it seems like if people are opening themselves up to, whether they're using a Ouija board or whether they are, physically intimate before marriage and they get pregnant, "Oh, I have to kill this baby." And they believe these things, certain narcotics and things that open up your mind, so-called, to principalities. It's like they're chained, right? We see that, and there's certain heavenly beings that are also eternally chained. I think like Nephilim, that type of stuff. But then there's the spirits of these things. Now this is just a convoluted question, but where does that kind of hash out in your own life and testimony? We'll close with this, but just thoughts on that, because again, demon possession's real, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent as it was, say, in the first century Judea. I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it is as prevalent.
Okay.
I would say that we just don't we have discounted it and called it mental illness a lot of times. And so what one tension I feel as a minister and I want to equip the church on is that many Christians have been taught a form of evangelism which can work well with a population that is kind of classically liberal, open to new ideas, willing to reason, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you do when um, a larger percent of the population seems to be either mentally ill or demonically oppressed? How do you evangelize them?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a different game. You're not going to reason with demons. So you have to adopt new strategies, and you have to be willing to walk away. Uh, and kind of dust the sand off your feet, so to speak. And so you need to adopt a more not a more biblical strategy, but a strategy that is available to you in the Bible, in
Mm-hmm.
which you can quote scripture, you can call forth God's power over this person, um, and you need to pray and fast. Um, in terms of the eschatological or the cosmic reign of Christ and why we see this return, one thing that we have to remember is that even though Satan is bound, the gospel goes forth. That doesn't mean that there will be battles that are not still there. It's not as if everything's fine now because Satan is bound and the gospel goes forth. No, like there's real battles for people's
Mm-hmm.
souls. People's souls are on the line, and so when you see the church shrink back from its duty to proclaim the full counsel of the word of God and equip their people to go into every domain of life and operate as Christians in those domains, you will see this stuff rise up because the
Mm-hmm.
church has ceded the field to the enemy, who's seeking to devour souls, prowling around. And so it should be a warning to all of us to uh, guard our faith, our hearts, our souls, to walk in holiness and righteousness. And it should also be a call to action for Christians to get in the fight and
Yeah.
stop playing like this fake nice version of Christianity. Be kind, be loving always. That's not in dispute here. But remember what Christ taught us, and remember that if you're hated by the world, he was too. It's like we've forgotten that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but that's kind of what I would say.
No, that's a good point. I mean, half the time when I get into big questions, you're like, man, there's like 50 answers to this. So no, that's helpful. Well, I know you got to get specifically. So let me read this from the article, and then we'll just we'll wrap up and just give people your socials at the end. Toward the end of the article, you say, while the broader political trends in our country are tracking to the right, and in what some call a vibe shift, the entrenched leftists in blue states are clearly undeterred in advancing their radical anti-God and anti-human agenda. And that's something I just Christians listening, people listening, any unbelievers maybe, but that's what it is. It's not neutral. And I think this lie of neutrality, this myth, is probably the most damning, wicked, evil, divisive thing that gave the enemy so much power. Because people are like, well, who am I really to say? My kid's transgender. Anyway, I'll get back to the quote. We cannot sit on our heels hoping that the battle will pass us by. The battle is here, and it is time to get in the fight. If we don't stop in places like Colorado, it will come to our brothers and sisters in other states who, for the time being, are spared from these political fights. This is our duty. This is my duty as a father, as a Christian, as a pastor in Colorado. I pray that God gives me strength, wisdom, and success in the fight. And then I would ask all fellow Southern Baptist pastors across the country to pray for us in these trying times as well. End quote. Good. I'll put the link in the description for everybody. Where can people find you, Chase? Church
Yeah,
website, all that.
I post on X at JHS Davis. Church is boulderwell.org. You can find our sermons and other things there. And that's the best place to keep up with what I'm doing.
Perfect. Brother, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much. And,
Thank you.
God bless. See you.
See you.
All right. So I don't know if you're discouraged. I'm discouraged. And it's a real thing, right? I'm not saying we have this happy-go-lucky, pie-in-the-sky type of mentality. Because in one sense, Christians were realists, right? If you're an authentic Christian, if you're really trying to live under the Lord, and you're not, a baby kindergarten Christian, and yet you're in your 50s or 80s or whatever, and you're seeking to mature, you're seeking to sanctify, being sanctified by the Lord, and all the rest, it can be very discouraging, right? You can look at the world, you can look at yourself, you can look at your sin, you can look at other people's sin, even those closest to you, which we often do, and think, man, I can't believe this. But then you look at other stuff like this with this bill, and you're like, oh my word, like how in the world did we get here, right? How is this bad? Dead naming, all these words, which, by the way, leftism always creates new words, right? They don't know what a woman is, they don't know what a baby is, they don't know what a border is, and they create these new things. Like Chase even said, homeless people or bums, as we used to call them growing up, they're unhoused, right? There are all these new terms, right? A woman's anyone who identifies as a woman. No, a woman is an adult female, right? Not that complicated. And yet logic and common sense and reason are not on these leftists. It's not what they do, right? It's just impossible for them to do. And some of that could be demonic. Now, I don't want to say that everyone is demonic and, you voted Democrat or you lean left, you're automatically a demon. That's not what I'm saying. But it's very possible, right? And increasingly so, especially with the oppression and the blood sacrifices of things like abortion. And really just opening yourself up with drug use and other sexual perversions, that these things we see, especially in the Old Testament, they're very real, right? And God warns us of those things, right? And it's not fictional and just made up. And so, anyway, this is a little longer end credits post log. Is that what that's called? There's epilogue. I don't know. This is the end, right? This is what it is. But we probably could have kept talking. Chase and I, he had to go. But something that just, again, struck me with those things is just the silence from so many churches. And again, you don't have to be loud, but you can go, right? Write, you can post, you can retweet, Facebook. Don't be afraid of being called a bigot. Don't be afraid of being called racist. Don't be afraid of being called transphobic, homophobic, all the rest. Please, dear Christian, like seriously, you who watch this now, if you confess Jesus, but you're like, I'm not a pastor, I'm not a preacher, I'm not a politician, I don't have any power, I don't have any following on YouTube or Twitter, on Facebook, on this and this and this, Instagram, whatever, right? Even those amongst you, don't get caught with their lies. Don't believe the be nice. Don't get sucked into their black hole, because that's what they want. They want destruction. They want silence. Don't be silent. Okay? Don't be silent. Stand for Christ, even if it's simple, even if it's small, even if it's not using pronouns, not putting your pronouns in your bio, writing an article, or writing your congressman, or just posting something, reposting something. I know a guy, he's a airline pilot. He's a pilot, and he's also a minority. Single guy, great guy, and he flies for one of the big airlines, and he's been called in more than once to HR for retweets of his pastor, my pastor now, Michael Clary, who's pretty aggressive and not aggressive, but he's pretty active, can be aggressive, I guess, on Twitter. And, this is concerning. Oh, this is concerning. What's this? What do you say about this? And he's not backed down, and he's not been fired either. He stood his ground. And that's the thing that's really that I want to just impress on you as we believe this, is that trust the Lord. I think there's such a fear of man and such a low, almost non-existent fear of God. Fear of man and no fear of God. And trust me, I struggle with it too. I really do. Even more so, well, not more so now, but there have been seasons for sure. It's hard. I get it. But don't fear man. Fear God, who is able to destroy both body and soul in hell. Don't fear man. What can man do? Jesus says. Kill you? Yeah. Stinks. Family miss you. But you're going to die eventually anyway. And you're standing up for what the Lord, you're ultimately putting your trust in God, right? You're trusting what he has done, what he has for you. I'm not saying go be a martyr. I'm not saying go antagonize, although history has shown us sometimes people do that. A lot of Muslims do that. That's not what I'm saying. But don't fear it, right? The worrier fears every blow that never comes. I love that. I forget who said it. You always, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. I don't want to say anything. Say something for your own good, for Christ's church, and definitely for his glory. So take care. If you're enjoying this, like I said, if you made it this far, you're probably already subscribed, I'd imagine. But if you're not, please do subscribe. Y'all take care. See ya. God bless. And keep talking about things that matter. We'll see ya.